The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi met the US President Donald Trump on the sidelines of the ASEAN Summit in Manila, the Philippines. Both leaders have told the media that the deep relationship between both countries goes beyond mutual trust. Prime Minister Narendra Modi said ties with the US is the greater benefit of Asia and humanity at large. On the other side, the US President Donald Trump called the Prime Minister Narendra Modi his friend and reiterated their commitment to work together.
ट्रम्प जहां भी गए हैं पिछले दिनों और जहां भी उनको भारत के संबंध में कहने का अवसर मिला है, उन्होंने भारत के संबंध में बहुत ही ऊंचा अभिप्राय व्यक्त किया है, बहुत ही आशास्पद भाव व्यक्त किया है। और मैं भी विश्वास दिलाता हूं कि भारत की विश्व की जो अपेक्षाएं हैं, अमेरिका की जो अपेक्षाएं हैं, भारत उसको खरा उतरने में भरपूर प्रयास करता रहा है और करता रहेगा। मैं फिर एक बार राष्ट्रपति ट्रम्प का हृदय से बहुत बहुत आभार व्यक्त करता हूं।
Big gentleman doing a fantastic job in bringing around lots of factions in India, bringing them all together. That's what I hear, and that's good news. And it really is. It's a lot of good reports coming out of India, so I want to congratulate them. But it's an honor to be with you. We're rounding the turn for our last couple of stops.
And for more on this story, we are joined live directly from Manila from our correspondent, the man who's tracking all the latest regarding the ASEAN Summit, Ramesh Ramachandran. Thank you very much again, Ramesh, for joining us on the broadcast. So yet another sign of what is now a very solid friendship, the one between India and the United States. Could you please sum up what might be the main areas of cooperation between the two countries?
Well, clearly, Daniel, it was a packed agenda for Prime Minister Modi here on the margins of the ASEAN and East Asia summits. To begin with, he had a fruitful discussion with President Trump of the US. This was a much anticipated meeting, a bilateral meeting, structured meeting on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit. And both sides discussed the entire gamut of bilateral, regional and global issues of interest to both India and the US, specifically the situation obtaining in the Indo-Pacific region, which comprises the ASEAN countries, also China. So clearly, there was a convergence of interests among both India and the US, and both sides expressed a desire and interest in cementing the relationship, the global partnership, the strategic partnership at the regional and global level. And the optics was there for all to see. Prime Minister Modi and President Trump exchanging pleasantries and talking, in glorious, glowing terms about India's and the American policies in the region and beyond. Prime Minister Modi, for his part, said that the India-US relationship straddles the entire world. It's not just limited to Asia, but covers the strategic dimension of in the entire world. At the global level. And President Trump, for his part, reiterated once again his interest and fascination with India's rise in the recent past, especially with Prime Minister Modi at the helm of affairs. And he had a thing or two to say about India's how he would like India to play a more influential role in the wider Indo-Pacific region. They discussed a lot of other issues like the South China Sea issue, the North Korean nuclear crisis. So all in all, it was an eventful and fruitful discussion. We are waiting to hear more from the Indian side in the next couple of hours, and I'll keep you posted on the developments and the fallout and outcomes from that discussion which took place here earlier today.
Thank you, Ramesh. Please do stay with us. We will need your expertise and your news way more. The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in fact, addressed a business summit during his visit to Manila for the ASEAN Summit. The Prime Minister Narendra Modi, during his address, said that the task to transform India into a superpower is proceeding at an unprecedented scale. He said that the country has witnessed an increase in adoption of digital transactions, and the government has repealed as many as 1,200 outdated laws. The Indian Prime Minister also made a push for his pet project called Make in India. He highlighted his minimum government, maximum governance push, saying that the government has simplified the process to start new companies in the country.
One of the major themes of this summit is entrepreneurship. We have launched a campaign called Make in India. Through this initiative, We are committed to transform India as a major player in the global value chain. We want to make India a global manufacturing hub. At the same time, we want our youth to be job creators, not just job seekers.
And we are going back again. We have Ramesh Ramachandran, who's currently in Manila, tracking down all the events and the news related to the ASEAN Summit. So, Ramesh, at this business venue, the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, praised the Make in India campaign. Was that an invitation to the ASEAN members to invest in India? And if yes, in which areas?
Daniel, yes, that was the sense one got as well. The ASEAN Business Summit was one of the highlights of Prime Minister Modi's engagements here in Manila today. And he, in a sense, made a sales pitch for some of his flagship schemes, such as Make in India, and also the ease of doing business in India was showcased as an example, as an attraction for ASEAN investors and business persons, companies and corporates to begin investing more in India. He spoke about the digital economy, how his Digital India scheme is working to uplift the people's life and standard of living in India, and also spoke about transparency and reduce corruption in doing business in India. So clearly, this was a pitch. He was making a pitch to the corporates in the ASEAN region to invest more in India in terms of infrastructure, in energy sector, also in the smart cities program which he has launched, his government has launched, in setting up the urban infrastructure in more number of cities and towns across the length and breadth of India. So in all, the message was message that sent out, which went out actually, was one of India being prime to attract foreign investment, especially from the ASEAN region, at a time when the ASEAN economies are looking to diversify their investment portfolio away from China and in favor of India.
And Ramesh, this leads me immediately into my question, which is how is China going to react regarding the prominent role that India is retaliating for itself inside the ASEAN Summit?
That's the most important question agitating the minds of many a diplomat and official here in Manila, Daniele. For a long time, China considered the Southeast Asian region or the ASEAN region as its own backyard. But there we are seeing a change in the dynamic with the entry of India as a regional power of reckoning into the equation and changing the regional dynamic in a significant way. Remember, for the first time in a decade, yesterday here in Manila, the officials from all four countries, India, the US, Japan and Australia, met for what is known as the quadrilateral arrangement or group, which met for the first time in 2007, and yesterday was the first time in a decade when all four sides came together to take stock of the situation obtaining in the South China Sea area and region, especially in light of China's so-called peaceful rise, which has caused anxieties, many an anxious moment for the ASEAN countries here, especially the Philippines and Vietnam, for instance, many of whom have overlapping maritime disputes with China. So India is looking to play a more influential, high visibility role in the wider Indo-Pacific region, and that has not gone unnoticed in Beijing.
And Ramesh, there have been protests against President Donald Trump while in Manila. So could you give us a sense of how large are these protests, if there are large protests, and if there are security concerns about these protests?
Well, on balance, Daniele, the protests that we witnessed over the last several days here in Manila, they are sporadic, they are irregular, but the fact remains that they are indeed taking place here in Manila, where the ASEAN and East Asia summits are taking place. Now, primarily, these are political groups, political activists who have a particular political affiliation, and essentially their target is the U.S. economic policies, which they claim and allege is ruining the lives of many a Filipino here in their country in terms of jobs, employment, and other employment avenues of their livelihood here in the ASEAN region. So their ire was directed more against President Trump and his visit, which, by the way, the protests have been following President Trump all across his 12-day Asian tour, beginning in Japan, then on to Seoul and China, Vietnam, and now the Philippines. So the protests, paradoxically, are targeting more, in a way, the U.S., not as much China, which has more maritime dispute with the Philippines.
Thank you very much. This was Ramesh Ramachandran, our international correspondent, currently in Manila, tracking all the news regarding the ASEAN Summit happening there in these days. And on the sidelines, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi interacted with the Indian diaspora and addressed a business summit in Manila, the capital city of the Philippines. While addressing the Indian diaspora, Prime Minister Narendra Modi underlined the importance of the Southeast Asia region. He mentioned his government's Act East policy push and highlighted also India's contributions to the UN peacekeeping forces. The Indian Prime Minister said his government is making efforts aimed at transforming India and ensuring everything in the nation matches global standards.
प्रारंभ से ही हमने एक्ट ईस्ट पॉलिसी इस पर बल दिया है, क्योंकि एक प्रकार से हम इन देशों में बहुत नजदीकी महसूस करते हैं, सहज रूप से अपनापन महसूस करते हैं। कुछ न कुछ कारणों से, कुछ न कुछ मात्रा में, कुछ न कुछ विरासत के कारण एक इमोशनल बाइंडिंग हमारे बीच में है।